Okay. Good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. Welcome members of council and viewing audience who have joined us on YouTube. Before we start, I'll read the land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation of the Three Fires Confederacy and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. We'll now have a moment of silent reflection, and then we'll stand for the singing of our national anthem. Adoption of the agenda that items H2 and I3 be deferred to the next regular meeting and the balance of the June 28th regular meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Reno and support Councillor Dicho Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Any disclosures of pecuniary interests? Seeing none. That the minutes of the closed meetings of council held June 2nd and 14th, 2022, and regular meeting of council held June 14th, 2022 be adopted as presented. Deputy Mayor Meloche and Councillor Desjardins, all in favor? That carries. Mayor's comments. I have 3. Good evening, everyone. Canada Day is coming Friday. This holiday celebrates the anniversary of Canadian Confederation, which occurred on July 1st, 1867. We hope you enjoy celebrating our country's pride and history with your family and friends over the long weekend. The town is investigating the possibility of using synthetic ice product called Glice Echo Rink as a skating trail that would be built as part of the Small Coast Waterfront project on Front Road. Test out this product at the Vollmer Complex until July 13th. We want to know what you think, so we're asking for feedback through a short survey available at the Glice demo on Rink A. Tomorrow, June 29th, the Public Works Department is holding a Stormwater Master Plan Public Information Center, number 2 at the LaSalle Civic Center from 4 until 7 p.m. We hope to see residents attend to learn about Stage 1 catchment area of Front Road between Turkey Creek and Gary Avenue. This includes an overview of the study, alternative solutions, evaluation criteria, and next steps. Information can also be found on the Studies and Special Projects page on our website. First item is our 2021 audited financial statements. We have joining, I believe, via Zoom, Katie Denbach and Dania Nabani. If I said that right, if I didn't, I apologize. Mr. Langwa.
Actually, good evening, Mayor and members of council.
Mr. Ferraro, sorry.
Yes, no problem. The report before you relates to our 2021 draft financial statements for your review and approval. Our audit partners are here to do a brief presentation. The report, I just want to highlight that the statements and the auditor's report are attached as Appendix A within the council report. And should the statements be approved, they would be provided on our website for the publicly available, as well as they'll be used to complete our financial information return. Both are legislative requirements upon approval of the statements.
Thank you, Mr. Ferraro. I'm assuming KPMG is taking over presently.
Great. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. My name is Katie Denbach. I'm the audit partner for the town of LaSalle, and happy to share with you the highlights of our audit findings for the year ending December 31st, 2021. So just starting with a quick reminder for council, the reason why we put this report together for you is really to demonstrate anything that we're required to communicate to you under Canadian auditing standards, as well as anything that we feel you would find interesting in your governance role over the financial statement audit. So when it comes to the highlights of this report, I'll just quickly touch on a few items. The audit is now complete. We had listed a couple of outstanding items as of June 3rd when this report was initially prepared. The first two items being the completion of partner and manager review, as well as the receipt of legal letter responses, have now been completed and can be crossed off that list. So really all that remains at this point in terms of being able to issue an unmodified audit opinion for the town is having our conversations with council here this evening, as well as obtaining a signed management representation letter from management and evidence of council's approval of the financial statements. The other piece of information I'll just note here for you is that we are independent of the town and are required to be so, as that's what allows us to issue a cleaner and unmodified audit opinion. Just really briefly, materiality is a concept that we use in the financial statement audit. The number that I'd like to point out to you here is our audit misstatement posting threshold, which in this case is calculated at $102,000. And the reason why I highlight that for you is if we had found any adjustments or differences within the financial statements greater than that dollar value, we would bring those forward to you through this report. Happy to report that there were not any of those such items to report, but just wanted to make you aware of the thresholds that we were using as part of our audit. We've also provided for you in this report some information on significant risks as well as areas of estimates within the financial statements. No significant adjustments or findings to note as a result of those, so I won't go into any further detail on those. Financial statement presentation and disclosure, we just note here that we don't have any concerns at this time regarding future implementation of new and revised accounting standards, although we have included in the appendix, in Appendix 4 and 5 specifically, that there are some upcoming changes to accounting and auditing standards that we wanted to make you aware of that will have an impact on the town and its financial statements in future years. So we'll be working with management up towards the implementation dates on those to make sure that we're all on the same page with regards to how they might impact the town. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Council questions, Councillor Carrick.
This is just more of a general question. So other municipalities in the region, and you looked at our auditing statements, so comparisons, would you have such a thing at this time? How we're making out what we were dealing with the pandemic and coming through the last year has been very tough.
Absolutely. So I can draw on a couple of insights. We don't do a whole lot of benchmarking as part of our audit. We're really opining on the financial statements of the town in and of itself, but a couple of items that I would point out that are positive in nature. You can see when you look at the attached financial statements themselves that the net debt number is coming down year over year. So that's the financial assets over and above the financial liabilities that the town has available. to them. So that number has been drawn down year over year, and you can also see that the reserve balances have been increasing. So both of those things to me show some good financial stewardship on the part of the town.
Thank you. Just a quick observation. So it looked like it was at $68 million of revenues or over turned over, and there's only $100,000 within discrepancy of 102. So that's pretty darn impressive. Is that not?
Mr. Langwa. No, I think he has the answer for you.
The $102,000 threshold would be if there was an error that would be brought forward. So of all the different financial transactions, there was no errors caught by, or not caught, but noticed by, brought forward by KPMG that were above that threshold.
So again, with the huge amount of money, is the point I'm making that that's pretty impressive, is it not?
I think it is. I'll
Thank you.
pat
Good answer.
Tono and Chantel on the back.
Whoops. Would you expect anything less from an award-winning budget team? But they haven't got caught. Dale, maybe just explain materiality. Just high level.
Katie, if you want to explain that, I
Sure.
can explain it if you'd like.
No, I'm happy to explain it. So materiality, the number that I showed up on the screen, it's sort of the highest level that we use when we determine which financial statement captions of the town's financial statements might contain a material risk of misstatement. And that's sort of the highest threshold that we use. But then there's a couple of thresholds that go below it, including the 102,000 that I mentioned for our audit misstatement posting threshold. And basically we apply those when we do substantive sampling and our risk assessment as part of the audit procedure. So the lower the level of materiality, generally speaking, the more audit procedures get performed over the balances. So I would agree with your comment. 102,000 isn't a very large number when it comes to our audit misstatement posting thresholds when you compare it to the dollar value of the transactions that flow through the town.
Thank you. Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is for administration. I had a chance to read through the numbers and you can see where things are moving and things that are improving. I just had one question that kind of stood out from the page, and that is under revenue, contributions from developers. We budget for absolutely nothing, and yet we show a pickup every year. Just remind me, why do we do that? Is there a strategy to that? And where does that money end up going in the end?
So contributions from developers, that is, as subdivisions are completed and built by the developers on the developer's dollar, once those are completed, they're taken over by the town of LaSalle and are now owned by the town. So we're responsible for those roads and the eventual replacement for those roads. So that is captured as a revenue. We don't budget for that because it really doesn't benefit us in any way. We budget based on a cash flow basis, where that's more of a non-cash figure. So that's the reason we don't budget. We don't know every year which ones are, when they'll be completed or when we'll take them over. There's really no benefit to budget for those non-cash related items.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize that it was non-cash related, so that answers everything. Thank you.
Any other council questions? Council's pleasure. Moved by Deputy Mayor Meloche, support Councillor DiCio Spagnuolo. All in favor? That carries. Dale, you have a
Yeah,
comment?
and I just want to make one more comment. Thank you to KPMG, and thank you to Chantel Anson, who's our supervisor of accounting. She puts a lot of work into this audit and make sure it goes very smoothly, and make sure there's a lot of audit working papers that are prepared for KPMG. So it's been it's been a number of years. We've had a nice smooth transition as she's come aboard 2 years ago. So it's working out really well.
She has good trainers. Okay, thank you for the presentation. Next item, we have the R2 Alley Distribution Lansdowne and Morton. Mr. Dedalt.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This report is actually one that is coming back from January of last year. Actually, if I can share my screen, if that would be okay, just to bring up the alley itself. Oops. Okay, so you may recall this one here from last time, and the issue that we ran into last year that led to some revisions of the policy itself is that you'll see here that I've shown the closed alley overlay. So the residents on Lansdowne, when these lots were created, already incorporated their portion of the alley. So the southerly half has already been acquired. And what we're dealing here is with the northerly half. And in this instance, we have two properties, 1730 and 1740 Lansdowne, that have fully encumbered the rear yard all the way across the alley. So their fences are back there. They have some landscaping, I believe. So the policy previously said there was a fixed value for alley purchase under the program. And the concern with council was rewarding those who encumber the entire alley, especially knowingly. And how do we discourage that pattern in the future? So we brought back the policy, I believe, twice before it was approved last June. And basically what that says is for the first half of a given alley, we'll say that an owner is entitled to it. Not that anyone is entitled to land that they don't own, but we'll say the first half would go to them at the alley closing policy rate. And then the second half, if they've taken over more, we would have that sold at fair market value. So that's kind of the context that sets the scene for returning here today. So there's really three key points to the policy that I want to go over that impact these three landowners here. And number one is that the policy states that we don't move structures, which includes fences, sheds. In this case, there is a fence along the northerly property limit here. So, and that's always been in there. Another point that's always been in our policy is that the program doesn't apply for development purposes. So if it's to be developed land, we're not looking to distribute that at the program rate. It's to be sold at a fair market value rate. And then the new portion is the fair market value for those who have encumbered beyond the midway point, which we have here with the two properties on Lansdowne. So to get us to where we are today with that policy, that framework in mind, the issue was, okay, how do we determine fair market value in alleys? And it's not some easy, simple task, I guess, but fortunately, we've had a few recent development applications that required alleys, right-of-ways, that sort of thing purchased for lots to be developed that were active development applications that were coming in. So we had to commission appraisals to sell those pieces of land. We are talking about lands in residential zone property, residential holding zone, which is what we have here before us. So apples to apples, we said we can use these appraisals and apply them to our alleys around the town. So that's what we've done here today. These appraisals are recent. This is within the last month, 2 months. Yeah, so these are recent land values, vacant land in LaSalle. And those numbers came to, as you'll see in the report, I believe it's around $45 to $47 per square foot over a lot. Now we did some math here using some appraisal tools to reduce that to $4.50 for the back of a property. We're talking land with lesser value than frontage, right? So that's why we come to $4.50 a square foot as our fair market value. So that's how we've decided on the value here. We've used it and we've entered into agreements with developers using this as a baseline now on multiple agreements, and also a couple other alleys that haven't had to come before you guys to council. So we've implemented this successfully so far, and we're moving forward with that. It seems to work, and it seems to reflect an accurate state of the market currently in LaSalle. So that brings us to our distribution options before you tonight. So the option one is that we follow the policy and we recognize where the fence line exists. So you'll see here the two arrows. Oops, my screen didn't change, did it? All right. How do I fix that? There we go. This should work. Okay, here we go. So the two arrows moving south, those are the owners on Lansdowne who have the fence along the rear of the property up here. So we'd be looking to distribute it to them. And then Mr. and Mrs. Mancini, these two portions at the end in the yellow are not encumbered by the owners on Lansdowne at all. So all along, we've suggested that these two portions should go up to the vacant land on Morton. And then the second option is that because the owners on Lansdowne have received their half previously, that the entirety would go to the Mancinis, and that would ensure a straight lot line, but it would also require the demolition of the fence and any landscaping that the landowners have on Lansdowne. So those are the two options before you. I just want to highlight that we've applied the dollar rate $4.50 a square foot on both properties, because again, one is outside the program, is a development usage, and the other one is under the program, but it's the second half of the alley. So in both instances, we felt as administration that that was the fair way to offer it to both landowners at the same market rate. So that is my report. I know that Mr. and Mrs. Mancini are here to speak as well as delegates, so I will turn the floor over to them. As subject to any questions, I'll be happy to clarify afterwards through council.
Thank you, Mr. Dalt. Mr. and Mrs. Mancini, if you would like to come have a seat. And there's just a little button you push, and then you'll see the red light on your mic go on.
That's the button.
That's it. Thank you.
We may need more than 5 minutes, though.
Okay, that's up to council's discretion, but you go ahead and start and we'll see how it goes.
Okay, do you want to do it first? Okay, thank
Who wants to
you.
be first?
Thank
Ladies
you, my
first?
husband.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Madam Deputy Mayor, councilors, administration. Before I start my presentation, I would like to remind our Mr. DeDalt that this is unserviced land. We don't know when it's going to be serviced, whether it will be serviced next year, 5 years from today, or 10 years from today. So we have to address the evaluation of this property in that perspective. But anyway, the complete alley behind Morton Drive is comprised of both unencumbered sections behind 1720 and 1750 Lansdowne, and sections encumbered with fences behind 1730 and 1740 Lansdowne. The unencumbered section behind 1720 and 1750 Lansdowne were offered to us by the town for $200 total in a letter dated March 24th, 2020. We accepted the $200 fee for the section without the fence and requested to be able to purchase the remainder of the alley with the fences behind 1730 and 1740 Lansdowne. The properties at 1730 and 1740 Lansdowne had already received their 7-foot alleys. This fact has been verified by administration on page 3 of administration report AD-09-2020, and I quote, "It can be stated that the owners along Lansdowne have already received the half of the alley they would be otherwise entitled to under the alley policy." These alleys in questions are the remaining 7 feet that have already been closed and surveyed with a reference plan drawn up in such a way that they were to be conveyed to the Morton Street properties. The owners of 1730 and 1740 Lansdowne admittedly knew that they were encroaching on property that they did not own. The importance of a complete alley to be conveyed to Morton Drive cannot be underestimated. Part 1 of our cover letter illustrates 6 vital reasons for this. Reason number 3 is of particular importance because it shows the effects of the loss of the alley on at least 2 future Morton Drive lots with 110-foot depths on one side of the lot and 117-foot depth on the other side of the same lot. See drawing page 22, Appendix A, attachments included with an administration report. There are no disadvantages to the Lansdowne properties if they were to move their fence to their proper locations. Their homes are already built, their pools are already constructed, their backyards are completed, and their lifestyle will not change at all. We are of the opinion that the town of LaSalle has the absolute right to ask a property owner to move their fence. If the fence is encroaching on town land or private property, especially if the property is registered under land titles. This request by the town of LaSalle is neither immoral nor illegal. Land titles registration does not give anyone the right to establish squatters' rights on property that they do not own. I believe that most people in the town of LaSalle would agree with asking encroachers to move their fences. To rule otherwise is establishing a dangerous precedent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mancini. Mrs. Mancini?
Yes. Okay, I have, there's a couple of additional items that I have here. Can I hand them out? I've got 10 copies. It's a copy of the letter dated March 24th, 2020 from the town of LaSalle to us. And it's a plan that shows Strathcona Boulevard at the back behind Morton.
Why don't you give us your presentation first and then.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, the alley policy that's stated in administration's report refers to, quote, any portion of the alley to be transferred beyond the halfway point due to an existing encumbrance, end quote. The fence encumbrance has been created by the owners of 1730 and 1740 Lansdowne. Since they have already received their 7-foot alleys, the encumbered section is beyond the halfway point for their properties on Lansdowne, but it is not beyond the halfway point for our properties on Morton, because we have not received our 7-foot section of the alley. And according to that, according to what Mr. Dedault said, the first half should go according to the closing policy rate, which is the rate that the town on March 24th, 2020 has offered to us, which is $200. Now, as my husband said, we have no idea when these lots are going to be, are actually going to be developed. All right. This is not development property. The only difference since the last time we were here, nobody said it was development property the last time we were here. The only difference is that the properties across the street have been sold. We don't have a developer's agreement with the town. We don't have any agreement with the person that bought the properties across the street. Nothing has changed. This is not development property. Anyways, the town of LaSalle is using an amount of $4.50 a square foot to value the alley in question. But the town admits that the above dollar figure represents the amount per square foot of a building lot. And I'm quoting, the lots on Morton Drive are not building lots, and the town is using a building lot amount to charge for these alleys. These are unserviced properties, no sewers, no services, no building permits. Market value is the price today, the market value today, not a future value that we don't know of. There are comparables. Okay, market value analysis compares similar properties in comparable areas. There are comparables, properties that have sold across the street and recently, and these are extremely relevant to these properties. So I've included a map, and that would be Schedule B, and it shows Morton Drive, and to the left is the subject property that's marked off in silver, and to the right, the numbered properties are the comparables. It just shows you where they are in comparison to the subject property. One is directly across the street and the rest are very, very close. These are real comparables. And if you want to have a look at Schedule A, page 1, 1750 Morton Drive across the street sold for 1.65 million. There's quite a large home on the property with a 2-car garage and tennis courts in the backyard. And conservatively, we've put a value on that house of 750,000, which leaves a value of 900,000 for the vacant land. So if you work it out, it comes out to $12.11 per square foot for the vacant land portion. Now, this land includes an additional street in the back. It's called Strathcona, which adds to the value of the property. Half of the depth of this property applies to Morton Drive and half applies to Strathcona Boulevard, which is behind Morton Drive. Lots 615 to 624 front on Strathcona, and lots 705 to 714 front on Morton Drive, according to the mapping. So using this analogy, this should be considered a standard lot. And you've got $12.11 a square foot there. All right, property number 2, 1790, Morton next door to 1750. Sale price $1 million. Square footage of property over 50,000 square feet. It works out to $19.66 per square foot. It includes a small home. As a matter of fact, it's very valuable property because one building permit would be available. If you rip that house down, you could build one house. So you get one building permit available on that land. And that's not available on our side at all. We don't have any building permits available on our side, but they have one there. So this land also includes an additional street in the back, which adds to the value of it. Strathcona is there. So half the depth of this land could be applied to Strathcona and half the depth of the land goes to Morton Drive. Lots 610 to 614 front on Strathcona.
Mrs. Nancy, let me interrupt you. So,
Yeah, I have a map of that.
okay, but you have 6 other properties. So I guess where you're going is you're trying to get the value of the property down. So
That's right.
we get that. You don't have to go through the rest of them. If you
Okay,
could, if
well,
you
we're
could skip that part, because it's been 10 minutes and you're allowed 5.
Okay,
So-
well, I'm just explaining. Now, I'm explaining also, if you take a look at comparables 3 and 5, those depths are very similar to Lansdowne to, Morton, to our land on Morton, 110 feet.
Okay.
So,
If you
okay,
can just give me this summation, I think council has
okay.
the
All right.
idea you're trying
So
to
the
present.
average price of these 6 comparables is $14.82 per square foot. Using the rear quarter valuation of 10%, it works out to $1.48 a square foot. Okay, recently, real estate prices have been going down and the real estate market is moving towards a buyer's market. These sales were made during a seller's market when prices were very high, some of them in April. So $1.48 a square foot is a true value for the alleys in question, not $4.50 a square foot. This is not development land. Who knows when this land will be developed? Most appraisers use 3 or 4 comparables. I've got 6 comparables here that prove that this property is not worth $4.50 a square foot. Our family has been involved in real estate for 48 years. Our son is an AACI commercial appraiser, and we believe our market values are correct.
Okay, I think we get your point. So
Okay.
do you want option 1 or option 2, just so council members can know?
Well, option 2,
But at a lower value is what you're trying to get at.
exactly.
Okay. All right, I'll, excuse me. Mr. Dadault, before we go to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just figured I would at least touch on our appraisals. And there was comments that these were for service lots. The appraisals that we had done, these were 2 separate appraisals. I think there were 4 properties each, so we're talking 8 properties were used. These were unserviced lands. These are lands to be serviced by the developer in these instances. So I am quite firm and quite confident in the robust appraisals that we had performed for these developments. And these developments are lands that are not far removed from the properties at issue here. So if anything, I urge to council to consider is that the dollar figure that we have arrived on as administration is one that we stand behind and we're looking to implement on a go-forward basis. $1.50 a square foot is what we've used for alleys at fair market value for the last, I don't know if it's been updated in the last 20 years. So to say it's $1.48 is actually lower than what we've been doing since around 2000. So we needed to update this number with these appraisals that were done. And again, we're talking appraisals from, again, an accredited appraisal, robust 50+ page for each document. That's how we came to numbers that we came to. So we're relying on those and we would ask that council consider that. Thank you.
Can I answer that? It says right in here, right in his, it says the above dollar value represents the amount per square foot of a building lot. He put it right in his report.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll open up to council questions. Councillor Reno, then Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration. And I apologize if I don't know who to send this to exactly, but I would like to know if the historical values that we've been using, the dollar for encumbered, $1.50 for unencumbered, or per square foot that we've been using, like you said, for 20 years or so. Are those in a bylaw or are they strictly a procedure?
I don't believe those are in a bylaw. I think that was just a kind of a best practice, and the actual disposal of municipally owned property. We do have a bylaw for that, and it says that it's administration to update from time to time, and it simply hadn't been updated. And it also says that when we don't have a number there, we should use an appraisal. So that's why with these appraisals coming in for these various developments that we've been doing and seeing applications for, we have used that and we're looking to implement that. And again, I've used this on at least one other expedited alley request that has come through, and it went through, and we've had, again, 2 successful development applications now that are off the ground using this dollar figure.
Okay, and the next question. So if it's a best practice, what you're asking for in this report, you're asking not to update the report doesn't ask us to update our policy. What it's asking for us to do is to allow the mayor and a delegate to go forward and to finish this deal. But at no point are you asking us to actually update this value. So, I mean, should you not be asking first for us to update the value and then deal with this? I mean, I'm just a little confused with the ordering of things, because this doesn't actually ask us to update to a new value of $4.50. It just asks us to allow someone to negotiate with the Mancinis on this amount. Could you just comment on that?
Again, the current policy for disposal of municipally owned land does not have a set dollar figure in it. It's just what we've been using. It doesn't say $1.50 a square foot and $1 per square foot if there's an easement. Like that's what we've been using. And that's what's been in place for a number of years. I wasn't obviously part of those discussions when those numbers came into be. So, I mean, it's still in keeping with that policy in the sense that we are still, administration is received an appraisal and is establishing and using a fair market value. So that we are in compliance with that policy.
So one final question. When's the last time we used $1 and $1.50 for the disposal of land? When's the last deal? Would it be within the last 2 years, the last 5 years? When's the last time we've used those figures?
There would probably, yeah, there probably was a couple, and that's where we were looking to bring us up to speed and think that's why we were thankful that with these couple of appraisals that we've had done, that we're kind of bringing our standards up into the current market, which is actually a reflection of what we see out there. So there have been a handful, yes, I'm sure, but offhand, I couldn't say that there was 1, 5, 2, but I'm sure there was a couple, but that's why we have not brought this forward. And we've, again, a couple of those development applications were held on to until we got these proper appraisals done and in place. So we could actually come with appropriate numbers for today's market.
Okay, thank you.
Just on that, I'll add, we don't dispose of or purchase any land without a proper appraisal, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's in the policy itself.
Right.
We have to do that. So that's what we've been doing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will try to attempt to clarify some of Councilor Reynolds' questions. The $1.50 and the dollar were established a while back. There was a number of alleys that council was being faced with a number of concerns with relative neighbors. At that point in time, the direction was to develop a policy and make it a little bit more straightforward in terms of a fixed dollar value for the alleys. That policy came into effect. The time escapes my memory right now, but it came into effect about 2018, 2019 or so. 2019 is this latest update. So the first go at this particular alley was part of that original policy. Subsequent to that, we have amended the policy a few times now, and it certainly sits the way it sits today with respect to what the dollar value is for the land. And granted that this land is, they may not be developable lots, they may not be buildable lots now, they are for future development purposes. The servicing of those lots lie with the landowners. That has always been the case with land in LaSalle. For those who want to develop the lots, the effort is put in through those landowners to develop those lots and create those individual building lots. So through this process, we established a number of different mechanisms to establish what that value is. So that first half is a set value, and then beyond that would be at an appraised value, and or if it is land that is going to add value to future lands that will form lots, it is at the assessed value. And that's what you're seeing today in those numbers that are in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Mara. Mr. Didalt.
So I've found the original policy there about distributing lands, and it's 2007. So that's where those values were set. So that's where we at 15 years ago now. So just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Didalt. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to administration, what is just a basic alley? What's the cost for that we're conveying for that a resident can buy the alley for? I know it's a new policy that we come back with again 2019 apparently. I can't remember the exact date, but
No, fair point.
what are we charging for a town-owned property for closing an alley to limit the liability? Basically, is what we're doing.
So if we're talking about I get the fair market value
No,
or under
what's
the
the town
policy.
charging to close an alley if someone wants to buy the alley?
Yep. So
How
if
much are we charging?
it would be $350 for the first half, and then if they go beyond it, if they've encumbered it like we have in this case here, and that's what we have in option 1.
Right.
That's when we do fair market value for that second half. So in this situation, they've already got the first half, so we're not doing $350 for that. That was done back in the day. So we're only talking about that second half for the Lansdowne people.
Right. So if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken, I believe this issue is the issue that we sent back to administration.
Yep.
When something is in dispute, they have to pay fair market value for the second portion of the town-owned alley,
Correct,
if there's structures on the property.
correct,
And that's what we have today.
correct.
That's what we're dealing with.
Yep.
So it's town-owned property, there's structures. So if they want the second half, because and they've acquired the property, not by legal means, I get it. I mean,
Yeah,
it is
it's
what it
it's
is, but we have to
enclosed
deal with
on
it,
our
right?
land. Yep, correct.
So that's why you came back with the policy that we asked for.
Yes.
So I just want to make that clear so that I'm understanding what the process here.
So option one follows the policy, and I believe in the last couple of days, I know it's not on the agenda itself, because it was submitted late, but both of the landowners on Lansdowne have confirmed that they are happy to accept the option one at the fair market value rate. So I believe council is aware of that, but I want to at least say that, so it was on the record in this meeting that both landowners on Lansdowne are in agreement with the option one option.
So it's unfortunate that we have to be put in this position because somebody acquired property that wasn't theirs, but because it's there and we're dealing with it, that was the suggestion that we brought forward, and that's what we come up with. So other than having them tear everything out, which I don't think is the policy, then I think I have to support option one.
Can I make another point?
I'll allow it. Go
All right,
ahead.
thank you. Okay, so it's obvious that the town wants to get as much money as they can. And with option one, they're getting $4.50 a square foot for the area that is fenced in. We will pay you $4.50 a square foot for the area that's fenced in. But I really think it would be fair if we could get the other section for the $200, $200, that the unencumbered section for the $200 that was offered to us. I have a letter right here from the town dated March 24th, 2020. And we feel that we should be getting that for $200. It was offered to us by the town. We have it in writing. And we will pay $4.50 a square foot for the encumbered property.
Okay, thank you. We have Deputy Mayor Milosh, then Councillor DeJarle.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. I think we have two issues here that we're kind of confusing a little bit. We're talking a lot about value of land, but I think we have to solve the first issue, which is, are we allowing the owners who have currently encumbered that land to stay or not? So I think that's what we have to focus on first. So my question, maybe to you, Peter, I guess, possibly, when I'm looking at the land on Morton, and I'm trying to figure out the lot lines, is it 1750 currently is not encumbered? 1750 did not close off their land, correct? Right? So the lot line on Morton is going to end up being in the middle of the property?
There is no lot lines on Morton as of right. That is what you see there in lot lines is the old registered plan. We have no indication right now how that land will be subdivided in the future. So there is technically no lot lines on Morton.
So do the Mancinis own the land behind 1760, 1768, 1780, and 1790? So you have that whole section there. Okay, and there are no other fences currently in place behind every other property besides 30 and 40. There's no other fences in any of those properties?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think that's our first thing we have to solve right now, is whether or not we're going to allow the owners of 30 and 40 to take the extra portion of land that technically they were not entitled to. And what you're saying is currently on those two pieces of land is a metal fence, or is it a wood fence? It's a metal fence and some landscaping. So I think I personally believe that we should have that removed and offered to the owners on Morton, so that we have a straight lot line going to the back of the properties, which right now will create a very jagged, and I know that was something we were trying to do for a while, was create straight property lines across the back. So that's what I would like to put forward. I realize it is against our policy and we've been dealing with this for quite some time, but I also, we've talked about this before, is taking property that you shouldn't have and using it. And that's, I think, a situation we need to make sure we stop in the town. And then dealing with item B, I think our policy needed to be updated desperately. 2007 is a really long time to look at values. I know we said the policy was in effect again in 2018 and 2019, yet we sent this letter in 2020. So I think that's causing a little bit of confusion on my end, why we offered it in 2020 at the lower rate. If I think I've missed something, but since we did offer them, if we allow them to have the property for 30 and 40 as well, I would propose that we do what Mancini actually put forward was those two properties, they will pay the full value for, and 20 and 50, we would give them at the rate offered to them in 2020.
Okay.
I have the
So are you-
letter if you
are you-
want.
That's okay.
Copy
Thank
of
you.
it.
We don't need it. We know it's on the record.
All
Are
right.
you making that as a motion? Okay. Is that clear? No. Okay.
So option B, 2, sorry, which would have the Mancinis get 30 and 40 as well as 20 and 50. But when it comes to the valuation and payment for the properties, 20 and 50 would be at the rate offered in 2020, which was 200. And the properties at 30 and 40 would be at the new valuation rate that is now in effect.
So we have a motion. Do we have a seconder? Counselor Desjardins. Okay, discussion on the motion. Counselor Desjardins, then Counselor Carrick, then Counselor Reno.
Thank you. Through you to, I guess, administration. Deputy Mayor Malash and I, our thoughts are going on the same level. And I do think that Mancini's, Mr. and Mrs. Mancini should have the option for 1730 and 1740 because they were taken over wrong. They, the two homeowners did something that I'm sure they were aware of. If their contractors, I'm sure, could see those little spikes that stick up in the air for your property lines, and things were kind of ignored. So I do think that we should deal with the option that we just discussed about taking the property back to Mr. and Mrs. Mancini.
Counselor Carrick.
Yeah, we asked for the policy, we got the policy, and now we don't want to use it. So it's a little confusing. Having said that, what kind of can of worms is this going to open up? We're gonna have to tell everybody to move their stuff now and everything, something comes forward. That's my concern. So how does that affect us down the road?
Mr. Dudal.
Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. And that was one of the concerns with the policy, because initially when we brought the policy forward, there were essentially two options. Do we acknowledge what's there and we don't get in the business of ripping out fences or having people move them? Because if they choose not to remove it, I will be in court getting orders to have staff or contractors come in, and then we're fighting over expenses and whatnot and entering property. Like that's the can, you're talking about the can of worms. That's what we be getting into. The policy that we adopted, that this council and then we revised again last year, was to acknowledge what's in there. So that is option one. But again, we will operate subject to your decision tonight. But the policy is to acknowledge what is in there, and that's hopefully the path of least resistance, both literally and metaphorically here.
But you made two options. You had
Mrs. Mancini, if you want to speak, you have to address the chair, okay? That's the proper protocol. I don't want to cut you off, but that's how it goes. So Mr. Dalt's not finished.
No,
Mr. Dalt.
No, Miss Mancini, she is correct. Like, there's two options, and at the end of option one, I do say that administration does support this one more. But again, I will follow the orders and directives given. So either
Okay,
way.
thank you. Now we have. Sure, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I just want to confirm though, when did we amend the policy? So I have the dates right, because I have a bunch of different dates written down. When was the amended date?
The amended date was June of 2021, just last year.
And do you have the date when we started dealing with this specific issue? Because this has been ongoing.
So this alley came before you, I forget if it was the first or second meeting of January of 2021.
Okay.
And then we brought back a policy report, I believe in March, that was referred back to, and then we adopted it in June. So the policy came twice, and this is the second time with this specific alley.
Do we have any other people waiting currently who we've deferred?
No, in terms of to come to council?
Yes.
No, everything else under the policy has been smooth, so.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carrick. Councillor Reno.
The better looking Counselor Carrick, is that what you meant? There you go. Okay, so I support the motion because I think it's important that we are looking at this encumbered land as basically being taken from the town of LaSalle. And that wasn't the right thing for them to do. And even the other property owners seem to be able to put their fence in the right place. And these two property owners chose to take more than what belonged to them. So I think it's important that we establish that. The other thing is that's kind of maddening is that, you know, this alley was already closed years ago and they were given what was owed to them. And they had no right to take more. So I agree that this should go to the Morton properties. And I also agree with the valuation. I would like to add a friendly amendment is that we then instruct administration to come back with a policy that we can approve with a new dollar value that can be revisited every 2 years. Just so that it's on paper and it's official, so that when we have to deal with this in the future, we will have a proper dollar value in place as opposed to what we had been using since 2007. Is that fair?
Mr. Militia is going to speak to that.
Again, if I would ask that if that is the wish of council, that we do that as a separate motion and not as an addendum to the current motion on the floor. And I would also ask that if, again, the recommendation that is within the report follows the policy that is on record. And so if council is looking for a change on the valuation, on how we determine what that value is, on whether or not it applies to land that will eventually be developed, and I guess the last part being, if council's wish is that we now go back to the policy and look at structures and those being moved, because it was very clear at the last time we reviewed the policy that council's wish was to leave the existing structures, albeit illegally in unowned property. The wish at that time was to let those remain and work around that. If council is now of a different opinion, then we need to amend our policy, because we will be getting, again, when I can't remember which member of council asked, what is the outfall? We will be getting more residents coming forward, pointing back to this situation and saying on Lansdowne / Morton, the fence was moved. Why won't you move it for me? That will be the question that will come back before council. So again, we have a policy that says one thing, council is moving in a different direction. And it sounds like, if I'm reading it correctly, that council would like to move in a different direction. And that's fine. We just need to have the policy match what the intentions of council are, because otherwise you're just going to get council chambers filled with people coming forward saying the policy, I don't like the policy, and council coming and having to debate that every time. The whole purpose of the policy is to debate the policy once and us to apply it. And so that's that part of it. So there's a few items at play that we will need to start to look at the policy and review it in that context. But again, I would ask that review of the policy based on those 2 or 3 items that I discussed are separate than the current policy, the current recommendation that's on the floor.
Thank you. That's not a problem because that wasn't actually where I was going with the motion. So I will make a separate motion with exactly what I would like, but I will support the motion by the deputy mayor.
Mr. Didal, no? Yes?
I was just going to piggyback on Mr. Militia's point there about, I believe when we brought the policy back in June at that meeting, we had maybe 150 transfers that had completed at that point in time. And I believe the number was something like 5% had been problematic. And that number is probably up to about 180 now. And this was one of the issues, one of the problem alleys at that time. So there's been no new ones. So again, if the policy is coming back up, I just want to reiterate what I said back in June of last year was that overall the success rate is very high in terms of processing these, but that's just in terms of in support of the policy itself.
Any other comments, questions? Councillor Carrick, then Deputy Mayor Malash.
So if we do go in that direction, council goes in that direction, I guess I'd be looking for numbers. So projected numbers potentially that we'd have to be dealing with to offset what might come forward when we want to move fences or structures or anything that puts us in that position, because basically it is our property. So I'm assuming we're gonna have to foot some of the bill. So before it gets too far down that hole, I just want to understand how much the legal or financial ramifications possibly could be, if that's even something you can ask or answer.
Off the top of my head right now, I cannot, but that's something you have to leave with me and I could come back at some future time. Yeah.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you. I think what I'm trying to do is look at the dates of when this was all brought forward, when we came up with our policy. And I don't want to change our current policy that we have. I think we finally came up with a great policy that, like you said, is working, but this issue was being dealt with before we put that policy in place. And that's why I asked, is there any other outstanding issues? And you said, no, this was the only one left. So in my mind, going forward, then if this is dealt with, anything from now on would fall under the new policy because we didn't deal with it before these policies. And that's why I'm willing to look at the situation a little bit different, because it's one thing I don't want to do is change our policy. I want us to stand by our policies that we put in place to make it easier on administration and know how to deal with this when people come to us. But like I said, my big issue is with this one, the letter that they have, this was all being dealt with before we put this new policy in place. And that's what I'm trying to figure out is how to handle this specific situation.
Mr. Didal.
Thank you through you. And to that point, I believe the council resolution from when this came up in January last year, the direction was to administration, go back and revise the policy so we can address this kind of situation. That was the main takeaway from that meeting. So, and that's where we brought in some new definitions as well as brought in this fair market value. So the policy was amended specifically to deal with this situation. So that's why our recommendation is to apply the policy that was approved in June to the situation, because the direction from that January meeting was to revise the policy accordingly. So I don't know if that helps clarify in terms of the timing, but the onus or the push to revise the policy began with this.
Any other comments, questions? Well, I'm an old dog and I think my 12 years here, almost other than twice, Mr. Mara, I've gone with policy. I believe we took the time to make a policy and there's always, not yet. When we make a policy, we do it so that when these situations come up, it's an easy decision. It's not an easy decision for the Mancinis. It's not an easy decision that has to be made and the values, everything you're talking about. But if we didn't have policies for issues, we'd always be in a quagmire of what do we do this time? And that's why we have policies. I understand your point. You're sympathetic to the Mancinis. I try to leave the personalities out. It's what's the town's policy? If our policy is to do this, then we do it. We're not going to open up a policy where different people are coming to, well, this fence was here. We dealt with somebody's fence a while back related to you. There's going to be situations. There's always situations, but that's why we have policies. I'll address you in a minute. That's why we have policies in place to follow them. If we didn't, everyone here that works here, whether it's recreation or engineering, finance, there's rules and regulations and policies you follow. And I understand they're not always easy to enforce, but that's why we're here. We don't, if we start changing, and to Deputy Mayor's point, she doesn't want the policy change, but want to change this because of what happened in 2020. But to Mr. Dalt's point, we revised the policy. This council revised the policy, and then we revised it again last year. It's up to council to vote on this, but my position is simply, we are here to address the issues with the policies that we have before us. And I don't know what else I can say on that, other than, is there any other comments? I think enough is said. Council has their information. I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Didal, the town administration had two options. Now they're backtracking on their second option. There were two options there. Not one. Option number two showed that we can have the property. It's very important to Morton Drive. Right.
It's option 1 or 2 based on
Exactly.
council. So
Right.
it's not, Mr. Didalt is giving us the options, and I say us, council. So we will vote on option 1 or 2, but right now the recommendation before us is to go with option 2, and you get to buy it. That's what we're discussing right now.
Right.
So that's what we have to vote on. Okay.
Okay.
So if there's not any other comments, questions, do you want to, is everybody clear on the motion? Okay, the clerk will read the motion one more time before we vote.
And please correct me if I get it wrong.
Can't hear you.
Okay. Okay, so that the report of the town solicitor be received, that council proceed with the distribution option 2 with properties ending 20 and 50 at the rate offered to the Mancinis in 2020, and with the properties ending 30 and 40 at the rate offered, at the rate stipulated in the report. And then that the mayor and clerk be authorized to do all acts and sign all documents which may be necessary to complete the sale of the said alleys as provided herein, and otherwise carry out the intent of the resolution.
Okay, we're going to have a vote, but I'm going to ask for a recorded vote on this. Okay, all in favor? Councillor Akpata, Councillor Desjardins, Councillor Reno, and Deputy Mayor Meloche. Opposed? You're for it, and Councillor Dicho Spagnolo opposed. The two marks, Councillor Carrick and the mayor. Okay, so you got your option 2. Okay, you're welcome. We've deleted Aiming. We have the 6th concession drain request report. Mr. Osborne.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of council. I'll just give a very brief presentation on this. We received a request to relocate the 6th concession drain, a portion of the 6th concession drain from a developer. This is in the section of the 6th concession drain between Huron Church and Disputed, just north of Laurier. This is in anticipation of a development application, so the cost of the engineering and the work would be on the developer's cost, and we would like to appoint Dillon Consulting as the drainage engineer.
Councillor Reno.
Just a quick question. Will this be an open drain?
Yes.
And will the town regain or retain any rights to go and clean that drain in the future? Like we usually look for an easement. Will we be regaining that?
It would likely, because it's development, it would likely get a dedication along the drain.
Perfect.
Rather than an easement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other, moved by Councillor Reno,
I'll move it.
support by Deputy Mayor Malash, all in favor? Carries unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Osborne, I think you're up again, the Martin Bergeron drain.
Very similar report, request for some minor improvements to the Martin Bergeron drain because of a development application. This one isn't a realignment, but rather a couple of road crossings. And we'd like to appoint Dillon Consulting.
Council's pleasure. Moved by Deputy Councillor Desjardins and supported by Councillor Akpata. All in favor? That carries unanimously again. Mr. Osborne, just on that, will they be putting a shovel in the ground this year, or do you think it'll be 2023? Not for the drain, but for the development.
I hope so. Yes.
You hope so? Okay. You're looking to your left. Everything's approved? Minor things, right? Okay, thank you. Appointment of proxy holders, Essex Power Corp. Ms. Jean?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Bondi. This is a report that we bring back to council annually with regards to appointing proxy holders for the Essex Power Corporation, the board. Mayor Bondi and Mr. Wodarski have authority to represent LaSalle and vote at board meetings. But for the directors, they need to be formally authorized to represent or vote for a shareholder meeting. So the recommendation is to have Mayor Bondi as a proxy holder and Mr. Wodarski as the alternate in the event that Mayor Bondi is unavailable.
Thank you, Ms. Jean. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, support Councillor Akpata, all in favor. That carries. Thank you. Okay, items to be received. Municipality of Shunia requesting support for the Community Schools Alliance Action Plan and Social and Economic Impact for Small Communities in Ontario study. Moved by Councillor Reno, support Councillor Carrick, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. City Cambridge requesting support for plan of action to address joint and several liability. It's a motion to receive. I'd like to support this one if I could persuade council. This is a problem we have. We talk about it at the county often, but it'll help hopefully with our insurance premiums down the road. Hopefully down the road, but today or tomorrow, no, but we need it to be changed at the provincial level. Hopefully.
So given that extra information that was not necessarily in the request from them, I will change from simply receive to approve, and we would approve and send out a letter.
Support.
Is that what we would normally do, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I would support that.
Perfect. Councillor Akpata, second, all in favor? That carries. Thank you, Councillor Reno and Councillor Akpata. Town of Blue Mountain requesting support for the inclusion of mailing addresses on voters on voters lists provided to candidates. Moved by Councillor Carrick, support. Councillor Akpata. All in favor? That carries. Summary of reports to council. Moved by Deputy Mayor Malash, support by Councillor Carrick. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. There's always a first for everything. Bylaws, the following bylaw, just one, 8714, all three readings. Moved by Councillor Dietrich Spagnolo and Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Committee matters. April 5th, 2022 Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting. Moved by Councillor Carrick, support by Councillor Desjardins. All in favor? That carries. Questions in council, in comments by council members. We have Councillor Akpata, then Councillor Carrick, and then Deputy Mayor Malash.
I have two, your worship. One, I've had some conversations with some members of the community about our realignment project that's going on, and I guess I direct it towards Mr. Mara. Mr. Mara, can you give me an update on what the status is and where we are with this? Because what I'd like to do is, I understand that we had sent something to the ministry, and I'm just wanting to know if we know any more. And if we do, can we share it? And if the ministry hasn't provided us with information, is there a way that we can reach out to them so that we can inform the members of our community as to where we stand on what's going on, sir?
Thank you for the question. I'm assuming you are referring to the Malden Road EA, particularly probably the Buford Road realignment. Certainly that project is in the ministry's hands at this point in time. We have been following up on a monthly basis with that particular project, and with no avail to receiving a response that has been in the ministry's hands since November 15th, 2021. So certainly if council wishes, I could put together a little bit more wholesome report and report back to council with a formal report and provide a bit of update from that standpoint.
Your worship, I would appreciate that.
So I can, your worship,
Councillor Carrick.
I will declare a conflict on that item as a family member's business is involved.
Okay, Councillor Akpata, that's number one. Number two.
The second one is really simple. I've had a couple of calls about some people who want to be involved in the Parks Master Plan and some improvements. And I'm just looking to Ms. Finero for some direction on, or any member of administration, as to who I can direct them to. This is an easy one. We've got some very happy people that love cycling in the community, want to put forward some of their plans, want to submit some things to the town, want to be involved in making us better, healthier, and things of that nature. And I just want to make sure I direct people appropriately.
Thank you, Councillor. To the Parks Master Plan, we have not started that project yet. We do have to come back to council with a option to bring forward a proposal, put it out for proposals, seek the RFPs, budget for that particular master plan. So when that occurs and we award the project to a consultant, there will be public consultation through that standpoint. So at the current time, there's nothing actively happening with respect to the Parks Master Plan. Internally, we are reviewing how to bring that forward from issuing an RFP. With respect to active transportation, that master plan has already been completed. That is folded into the transportation master plan. So it was a combined overall townwide transportation and active transportation master plan. We use those two documents in guiding future developments and getting the sections of trail, bike lanes and things of that nature built as part of developments, including with that, we also use that for our pedestrian improvement safety aspects that have been being implemented over the last few years. So if there's anyone who wishes to take a look at the active transportation master plan, that's currently available on the website. Should they have any questions, they can certainly follow up with town administration. But as we issue an RFP and award the consultant for any sort of future Parks Master Plan, that will have a complete public consultation component to it, and we will be advertising that accordingly.
Supplemental, your worship? Is it fair then, Mr. Marr, to direct these folks to submit something, hang on? There are a lot of motivated people that have reached out that want to participate, and I don't want to lose the public engagement. So if you could give me some direction as to what you want me to take back to them, because like I said, what you stated, I'm aware of. I just want to make sure that the public who wants to participate and wants to put forth ideas can get them to us while they're fresh in their head. And if so, who should I direct them to?
Certainly, they can submit them, but again, we don't have an active project, so it would sit in a file until we have an active project started with respect to a Parks Master Plan. I would encourage them to document them at this point in time. When we do have the Parks Master Plan, that would be the appropriate time. It's best that they bring those forward at that time, share them with town administration, through as well as the consultant and see what of those aspects are implementable through the Parks Master Plan, what makes sense. Because certainly a lot of these master plans have budget implications. So we then take them and bring them forward to council through future budget years and build those various aspects. So at this point in time, probably just document it and bring them forward at the appropriate time through the Parks Master Plan.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
You're welcome. Councillor Carrick.
Thank you through your worship to administration in regards to the sidewalk on Normandy from Sovereign to Ellis update.
Yes, thank you for the question through your worship. I believe we're just waiting on locates at this point in time. The work's been tendered, awarded to Amoco. We've had letters go out and we know we've met with a few residents. And I believe they're just waiting for locates. So we're hoping in the next couple of weeks. I think we just did our portion of the locates recently. So that's how we know it's in that state. But with most things, all construction work is taking a little bit longer and locates falls into that as well. So that's a little bit of a holdup at the moment.
Thank you. So just so I'm clear, we approved this in the last year's budget, just so I'm clear, like we're not adding anything. This has already been approved.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Locates seem to be a big problem. We have Deputy Mayor Meloche and Councillor Desjardins and then Councillor Dicho Spagnuolo.
Thank you, Mayor Bondi. I would like to put in a request to Essex Power about possibly coming in, doing an open house and meeting with our residents in LaSalle. We've had the issue, I know Councillor Desjardins brought this up last year, I think, about the power outages that we're experiencing in the town of LaSalle. And my concern is that because these blips are happening so often and really in a concentrated area of LaSalle, that maybe they're not getting those blips recorded. So when they tell us, oh, there aren't that many, maybe they're so fast that that's not being recorded on their end. And it just seems like the issue is growing. And for anybody who's on Facebook or LaSalle community page, it is a weekly discussion, if not almost daily, of how many power outages our residents are having. And it's unfortunately ruining appliances and causing issues in their homes. So I think it's time that we ask Essex Power to come and meet with our residents and maybe fully understand the situations that we currently have. So that's item 1. Item 2 is more of a procedural question, and I don't know if this is even an option. Sitting here going through item I, one by one, at the county level, we do it as a information items to receive, and you can approve them all at once and pull one out if you want. Is that something we could consider at this level instead of going through each one by one? Just an idea for the future.
On Essex Power, I will tell you that everything's recorded. I work in a place where we get blips all the time. And you could, if you record them, send it to them, they'll say this was caused by this, what caused them. Sadly, there are a lot of blips, and some of those blips are not our fault, they're out of our area, but when the auto reclosure closes, it has to shut one off and open another one, and that little blip is what's happening, sadly. But it's good to have Essex Power come and talk to everyone. We have Councillor Desjardins, then Councillor Dicho Spagnuolo.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I was going to ask the same thing about Essex Power because it is getting to be just a constant barrage of calls and questions about why and jokes about how many squirrels are being killed and you know, how many animal interference things we can have. So I think that it's one thing if we talk to the residents ourselves as council about Essex Power, but I think to have Essex Power come out and put their face out there and talk to people, I think it would mean more than when we're talking to them. So if we could do that. And then we did take something off the agenda tonight about naming Front Road Park. And I'd like administration maybe to do a report about involving the public, if we can do that. I know that we had good response years ago when we had a decision about is this going to be LaSalle or is this going to be Trillium? And I'm really glad we picked LaSalle, to be very honest. But I'd like to see some more public input about names of Front Road Park. I think the public respects or feels respected when we ask them for their input. And I think that going forward, that's important. So if we can figure out if we have perhaps 3 or 4 or 5 names that have come up besides Petite Côte, that we put it out to the public and maybe have them vote on it. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Edicio Spagnolo.
Thank you. Through you, I just have a question. I'm not sure if it's to Mr. Mara, but I did have a couple of inquiries regarding naming rights of the dog pound, tennis courts, and any rooms at the event center. Are we offering that? And if so, how do these people go about getting that information? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Typically, those come through directly to administration as sponsorship opportunities. Those discussions occur at the administrative level with a proposed sponsor, and then they are brought forward through to councils for final approval. So certainly, if anyone has any opportunities or thoughts of sponsoring any of those aspects, they can certainly bring it through administration, through Mr. Militia, myself, or any other administration, and then we will review internally and have some discussions with those particular sponsor opportunities.
Councillor Carrick, then Deputy Mayor Malash.
Sorry, just to follow up with Councillor Anita's comments and response back from the administration. Is it possible to know what we're actually want to sponsor? That'd be easier as opposed to them calling up saying, okay, I want to sponsor the dock or the event center. Like, can we come up with some kind of a diagram or a sheet where it says room A is available, room B is available, that kind of thing, as opposed to them coming to us saying, oh, you know what, maybe I want to sponsor something here. What's the opportunity for that? You know what I'm saying? Does that might make it more clear?
Certainly, I think there's certainly we can do that. But I think there's maybe 2 avenues of sponsorship. So certainly those related to the event center and the waterfront project have one set of sponsorship opportunities. And then there are other sponsorship opportunities throughout the town. And so I think if for those members of council will recall, when we built the Volmer, we had a laundry list of items that folks, it was a bit of a cafeteria list that said, if you'd like to sponsor Rink A, which is still available if anybody's interested. If you wanted to sponsor that, this was the price point. If this Rink B, this was the price point, and so forth. So we have not done that with the event center. We have been holding off because of some of the challenges we've had with construction down there. But we can go back and look at that side of it. Some of the other areas outside of the event center, outside of the waterfront project, are more isolated and more, one-off. And so those require more, if somebody wants to come in and sponsor amenity A or B that is not related, or would like an investment of some sort, we tend to deal with those on a one-on-one basis.
Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you. I forgot. Last week, I had the opportunity to attend the graduation ceremony for Villanova and Sandwich, where we were able to give them a bursary. And I just really want to take the opportunity to congratulate all of our graduates at the high school and grade school level. It was really nice to be in person again and see all of these kids getting that opportunity to walk across that stage. So I just wanted to congratulate everyone, as today's officially the last day of school.
Thank you. Councillor Renault. I neglected to your motion. You had a motion in relation to policy. Did you want to put that forward?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I would just like to ask administration to update, as we were told before, in the past, we've had a dollar amount that was a standard practice. Could we just bring a new dollar amount forward? If it be 450, that's fine, but just something formalized in a report, so that in the future we can refer them back to that report and say, this is the amount that has been chosen by administration, has been vested by administration.
Thank you. Councillor Dietrich? Oh, yeah. Okay. There's no support required. They're just going to make a report. Okay. Seeing none, I'm just double checking. Notices of motion. Deputy Mayor Malash.
Thank you. I have two I'd like to bring forward this evening. So the first one is a notice to bring a report from administration regarding regulations and bylaws surrounding Airbnbs in the town of LaSalle. It seems like most areas surrounding us and in Ontario are dealing with some situations with Airbnbs, and it probably be good for us to look into what type of bylaws we should have in place in our own municipality. And then the second notice would be for a potential idling bylaw in the town of LaSalle. Again, we are trying to do what we can to support our environment and make it a cleaner place for our residents to live. And with having so many large schools in our municipality, if anyone ever drops their children off or tries to pick them up at the end of the day, they'll notice that there are vehicles who sit out front and idle for almost 20 minutes. So this bylaw would be kind of put in place as an educational piece, more so than us looking to try to go out and ticket these people, because that really isn't something that I believe is feasible with our one bylaw person in the town of LaSalle. But I think it'd be an important bylaw to get in place and start educating our residents, and maybe post signage around school zones about, you know, the harm of idling in those areas.
Thank you. Whatever happened to buses? I used to walk uphill bare feet in the snow. Yeah, with confirmatory bylaw, all three readings. Councillor Reno and Councillor Dicho Spagnolo, all in favor? That carries. Either schedule of meetings. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone, and any viewing audience we had on YouTube. Have a great night.